With the new year almost here, today we're pitting 60 of the most iconic pop culture characters of 2025 against each other to see who will win the Squid Game.
Welcome to the Squid Game. We're excited for everyone to play.
I'm ready!
Today's roster of contestants is as follows. Superman and Lex Luthor from Superman 2025, Rumi, Zoe, Mira, and Genu from K-pop Demon Hunters, Donkey Kong, Pauline, Void Kong, and King K. Rool from Bonanza, Kirby, Rick, and Noir DDD from Kirby Air Riders, Steve from Minecraft Movie, Hornet, Lace, and Chakra from Hollow Knight Silk Song, Samus from Metroid Prime 4, Marshall, Francis, and Rick Kruger from Common Side Effects, Momo and Akaran from Dandadan, Charlie, Alistair, and Vox from Hazbin Hotel, Pim, Charlie, Mr. Boss, Alan, Glep, and Mr. Frog from Smiling Friends Season 3, Tanjiro and Zenitsu from the Demon Slayer movie, Asuka, Deku, Bakugo, All Might, All For One, and Shigaraki from My Hero Academia, Mr. Wolf and Kitty Cat from Bad Guys 2, Judy, Nick, Paubert, and Gary DeSnake from Zootopia 2, Henry Creel, Will Byers, Elle, and Hopper from Stranger Things Final Season, Gumball and Darwin from the Gumball Revival, Hank and Bobby Hill from the King of the Hill Revival, and SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, The Flying Dutchman, and Plankton from the Search for SquarePants and Plankton movies.
The following are the ground rules in this Squid Game. Number 1, no outside allies or sidekicks. 2, no outside weapons, with the sole exception of any equipment needed to survive. Number 3, no magic. 4, natural abilities are allowed. The first game is red light, green light. You may move forward when it shouts green light, stop when it shouts red light. If your movement is detected afterwards, you will be eliminated.
Speed, composure, and general athletic ability are the most important skills in this round. Now, we've got some straight-up superheroes in the running, so let's get the obvious out of the way. Deku, Superman, Bakugo, and Huntrix are gonna have a pretty easy time here. And since they save lives for a living, they'd probably spend some time saving some of the more vulnerable players. That altruism would help Francis and Will Pass, since they're less supernaturally gifted than some of the others. We also have to mention All Might, since without his badass new armor, he's not as capable as he was in his prime, but like in the show, we're sure Bakugo would step up to go back for him.
Stop nerding out!
Then there's Charlie, Vox, and Alistair, who are each supernaturally powerful enough to cross the finish line, even if Huntrix is probably giving them some dirty looks. Not everyone would need help to pass, though. Even though Momo looks like a normal teenage girl, she's got some pretty impressive psychic powers. And she's also got Akaran, who has the powers of a super speedy demon. Likewise, you might look at Rick and see a big, silly hamster. I look at Rick and see the most terrifyingly, unrelentingly fast creature in existence, who just so happens to be a big, silly hamster. He'd gladly carry Kirby across the finish line for old time's sake. Unfortunately, there's one loser in the Air Riders gang, Noir DDD. As quick as he was on a wheelie bike, Noir DDD is the physical manifestation of a being that spent centuries unable to move. We feel like that would make suddenly being forced to run carefully for his life a daunting task. That's not to mention the fact that Noir DDD is one of those characters who's made of energy that's constantly moving, which means he's guaranteed to set off those motion sensors.
Player eliminated.
Maybe if the real king was here, he would have shown Zora how it's done. Thankfully, one king is able to thrive here. King K. Rool didn't have any trouble getting past the finish line, but not without bullying some of the other players like Gary DeSnake. K. Rool wasn't going to allow another reptile to usurp his rightful throne, so he went after Gary rather early on.
We aren't the bad guys. They are.
Player eliminated.
The danger he posed didn't stop Judy from trying to help her new buddy, which unfortunately doomed her as well.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Thankfully for Void Kong, he avoided the brunt of K. Rool's wrath by sneaking behind him so the motion cameras wouldn't capture him. Another Havoc Wreaker was Shigaraki, who took the opportunity this game presented to try and destroy some of the competition. Lex Luthor, Hank, Bobby, and Rick Kruger were his victims in this round.
Players eliminated.
Since they fall into that normal human category that makes them easy targets for a force of nature like Shigaraki. After the VIPs enjoyed enough of that destruction, the soldiers warned Shigaraki to stop trying to destroy the arena, under the threat of elimination. They didn't stop him from taking the opportunity to decay All For One while their backs were turned though.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Needless to say, things are heating up and some players are taking it better than others. Zenitsu can be very heroic, but what he cannot do is keep himself composed when he's conscious. Even in the movie, where he's able to fight pretty damn capably, he's acting on emotion to avenge his master. It's totally valid, sure, but it's not getting him any points here.
Player eliminated.
As for Tanjiro, he's doomed for similar reasons. There's no way this absolute angel is leaving anybody for dead. He'd carry Zenitsu across that finish line if it was the last thing he did, if only to try and give him a proper burial.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Steve and Marshall also fell in the act of trying to save others.
I am Steve.
While their actions were noble, their strength wasn't quite enough to protect them from the chaos caused by bigger players like K. Rool, Henry Creel, and Kitty Cat.
Players eliminated.
And the last one to fall in this round is Plankton, who got right to the end of the finish line only for DK to accidentally stomp on him. Seriously, he's really sorry about that, Plankton.
Player, you have been eliminated. 47 out of 60 players remain. Let's move on to the next game, Honeycomb. Players must cut out the shape from their cookies. Those who break their cookie or run out of time will be eliminated.
Patience, steady hands, and dexterity will come in handy here, as will general resourcefulness and creativity. So aside from the obvious Hornet and Lace, who both use needles in everyday life, who else passes? The people who work with their hands on the regular are in good standing here. Void Kong, Nick, Mr. Wolf, and Alan all come to mind. Don't forget that Alan is the one who built the boss's rocket boots after all. And speaking of which, Mr. Boss is in good standing too. He only just barely managed to keep composed during the last round since his life was on the line.
Alan, we are so.
But given how fast he can go with that knife game, this would be a pretty simple task for him.
Guess I'm
It's also one that Mr. Frog could handle. That is, it would be if he weren't busy bludgeoning several soldiers to death with his needle.
Hello, but I'm not sorry.
Player, you have been eliminated.
SpongeBob, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs managed this challenge pretty well. SpongeBob is a skilled chef, Squidward has artistic talent, and even Mr. Krabs has been shown to have a talent for craftsmanship here and there.
Let's go!
Even Patrick managed to carve his cookie into a perfectly chiseled replica of the Eiffel Tower. The only problem is that his shape was supposed to be a circle. But good effort, Pat.
Player, you have been eliminated.
While many players like Samus and Superman wouldn't have any trouble staying calm and collected even in these circumstances, the same can't be said for everyone. Frances lost her cool almost immediately when she ended up picking the most complicated shape in the game.
Player, you have been eliminated.
As for Nick, he's both overconfident and grieving his partner, so he's a bit too distracted to make it through this round without issue, and a bit too prideful to ask for help.
Player, you have been eliminated.
And last but not least of this round's eliminations is Kitty Cat, who we think is just a bit too impatient and hot-headed to keep her cool in this round. Knowing her, she'd probably demand an easier shape than what she got, and when she's told no, the fight that ensued might be enough to get her eliminated all on its own.
Player eliminated. 42 players remain. It's time for our next game, six-legged pentathlon. The rules are as follows. Players will split up into groups of 5, tie their legs together, and move in tandem around a track. Every 10 meters, one player will play a mini-game until it is completed, with each member playing once. The goal is to complete all games in the allotted time, repeating each one until it is complete.
So here are the minigames. Diaki, throw a paper tile at the ground to flip over another paper tile. Flying Stone, throw a small stone at another small stone and knock it down. Gongi, a traditional game of Korean jacks. Spinning Top. And Jeggi, kick a Jeggi in the air 5 times in a row, kind of like hacky sack. Balance, composure, and general gaming prowess are important characteristics in this game, but arguably most important is teamwork and the ability to put together a good team. This will be the point in the game where alliances and teams start to be formed. That is, for the players who don't already have teams. Zoe, Mira, and Rumi have been working together for most of their lives, and their physical strength and agility make them perfect to work together. Given her age and interests, we'd bet that Pauline is probably itching to team up with them. And what kind of adoptive dad / best friend / big gorilla wouldn't go along with that idea? Thus, the alliance between DK, Pauline, and Huntrix was born. And as you would expect, they absolutely kill it. And it's not just the demon hunters who did well. Alistair and Charlie recruited some other underworld dwellers to help them out, including the ominous Flying Dutchman and Akaza. Even Henry Creel managed to charm his way onto her team, leaving Charlie with teammates who, in her mind, were perfect redemption material. You might think that leaves Vox in the dust since Alistair would not be willing to join him, but he actually got along pretty well with Void Kong, due to their shared love for influence, power, and all things brighter. But unfortunately, not everyone was lucky enough to secure a team for themselves. Paubert was too awkward to convince the more serious players. Samus has had just enough quirky millennial dialogue in her ears for the last several weeks.
Player, you have been eliminated.
And as for Shigaraki, there was no way anyone was joining him after the stunt he pulled in round 1.
Player, you have been eliminated.
And that leaves us with 8 teams of 5 for this round, and frankly, most of them did pretty well. There's just one exception. Gumball and Darwin, being straight up children, are naturally the most vulnerable players in the game right now. So it's only natural that some of the other players would take pity on them, like Superman, who's all about protecting the innocent, and Samus, who's been routinely willing to die in order to save others. There's also Mr. Wolf, who was more than happy to help out some fellow anthropomorphic animals. Unfortunately for all 5 of them, Gumball is known for having some terrible luck, and constantly making most of the crazy situations he gets into worse due to his ego and clumsiness. Usually, it's pretty funny.
I think we're done. How does it look?
Here, it's not as funny. We'll put it that way.
Players eliminated. 35 players remain. Our next game is Mingle. Here are the rules. Players will stand on a rotating platform in the center of a large circular room. At any given moment, a number will be called out, at which point players have 30 seconds to get into groups of said number and secure a room for themselves. Any player who does not find a room with the correct number of players will be eliminated.
Speed, composure, and ruthlessness are your best friends in this round. Which characters are able to make sure they get a room, and which ones would actually do what it took to go through with it. This round is where duos are in luck. Pauline and DK would stick together, and the same goes for Akarun and Momo, and Kirby and Rick, allowing them to pass without issue. Even Alistair and Charlie made sure to keep each other alive, since Charlie sees Alistair as a friend, and Alistair, well, he sees Charlie as something important to him. Unfortunately for Void Kong, Vox saw this game as an opportunity to get this literal monkey off his back in favor of a stronger ally, like, say, the big crocodile monster over there.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Yeah, unfortunately for Vox, King K. Rool wasn't particularly interested in teaming up. He was always curious what a TV tasted like, though.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Ginu and Akaza both have the physical strength to make sure they can strong-arm their way into a room before the timer runs out, so we think they're safe for now. Once they saw Henry trying to shove some of the weaker players out of the way, they had no problem trampling over him to get to safety. If you don't give respect, you don't get it either.
Player eliminated.
And as is often the case, we have some heroic sacrifices too. What kind of Squid Game would it be without them? When the clock starts ticking, All Might was more than willing to sacrifice himself to make sure Deku and Bakugo could live on. But Deku beat him to the punch, making sure his idol and arch frenemy would both live on.
Player, you have been eliminated.
We could see Chakra going down to buy Hornet and Lace time to find a room for themselves. She preferred dying in the chaos to being a victim of circumstance.
Player eliminated.
Hopper prioritized making sure Elle and Will were safe, even if it meant keeping himself vulnerable and ultimately to being eliminated.
Player, you have been eliminated.
Mr. Boss came in clutch to make sure his boys all survived, and may God have mercy on anyone who tried to get in between them and a safe room. He even sacrifices himself to do it. Thanks to Charlie and Alan being able to carry Pim and Glep, they all made it through this game safely.
Player eliminated.
Coming slightly less in clutch was Mr. Krabs, who was able to save himself and SpongeBob, but had to lock Squidward out once it was revealed that the Flying Dutchman was already in the room they chose. And as fate would have it, the number chosen for that round was 2. Lastly, Huntrix is breaking up, because during that infamous 2 round, it was Mira who shockingly made the push to get Zoe and Rumi into a safe room, allowing them to live on.
Player eliminated. After last night's brawl, 31 players remain. It's time for the next game, Hide and Seek. Players will be be separated into two teams, Hiders blue and Seekers red. Seekers will be given a knife with the requirement of killing at least one hider within the time limit. Hiders will be given one of 3 keys, gaining access to various doors and hiding places throughout the arena. They must either find a 3-keyed exit before time is up, or simply stay alive for 30 minutes.
For this game, roles are selected randomly, and players have a few moments to swap teams if they choose, but only if 2 players mutually agree. With that said, here's how we think the teams would pan out. Our hiders include Zoe, Donkey Kong, Pauline, Rick, Momo, Pim, Charlie, Alan, Glep, All Might, Will, Eleven, and SpongeBob. And our seekers include Rumi, Gino, King K. Rool, Kirby, Hornet, Lace, Akarun, Charlie Morningstar, Alistair, Akaza, Bakugo, Mr. Krabs, and the Flying Dutchman. Hiders will want stealth on their side, but if they run into a seeker, they'll either need the speed to outrun them, or the strength to defend themselves. Seekers will need strength and speed for obvious reasons, but also the sheer brutality to eliminate their victim. As fate would have it, almost all of our hiders are just innocent souls. That means not everyone would be able to eliminate them. Right off the bat, we don't think Kirby, Rumi, Hornet, or Charlie would be willing to eliminate any of the hiders.
Players eliminated.
Similarly, Akarun only accepted being a seeker so he could protect Momo. While he'd ultimately succeed, he'd get himself eliminated in the process.
Player eliminated.
And now we move on to the characters who would have 0 issues eliminating a hider. Alistair was literally a serial killer in real life, so he wouldn't have any trouble hunting down some victims. As fate would have it, he saw how rude Charlie was to his girlfriend in the season finale of Smiling Friends.
Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me.
And decided that was reason enough to target him. Obviously, this sent poor Pim into hysterics, so Genu decided to go for a mercy elimination.
Look, Pim, I know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
Players eliminated.
Then we have Akaza, who preferred a more honorable duel to a full-on hunt. He challenged DK to a tussle, which the Great Ape accepted, and thanks to DK's durability, he managed to survive, keeping Akaza occupied until time ran out. Unfortunately, while DK was distracted, King K. Rool decided to attack Pauline, an act that would have been fatal had it not been for Zoe stepping in between them in the nick of time. After they realized what K. Rool had tried to do, Akaza and DK teamed up to protect Pauline from K. Rool. Akaza's evil, sure, but he's not that evil.
Players eliminated.
As for Lace, she tried to attack the elderly All Might in an attempt to save her own skin, but was thwarted by Bakugo. Unfortunately for Bakugo, thwarting Lace disqualified him, too. Seekers aren't allowed to eliminate each other, and Bakugo's strength would mean that he'd be able to wipe Lace out without much effort.
Players eliminated.
Lastly, Mr. Krabs initially decided to challenge Glep to a duel, having plenty of experience with fighting tiny green men.
Outside. Say hi to the missus for me.
But his plans changed when he saw the ominous Flying Dutchman preparing to steal SpongeBob's soul. Krabs is not a model citizen, but in that moment, he decided to do something surprisingly noble. He jumped in between SpongeBob and the Dutchman's ghostly attack, getting himself eliminated, as well as the Flying Dutchman by proxy, with SpongeBob rescued by a last-moment act of kindness by his boss.
Players eliminated. 13 players remain. It's time for the next game. Marbles. You will play the game of your choice with your partner. The player to take all 10 marbles wins. The loser will be eliminated.
Players pair up in teams of 2. However, it's revealed that they'll be playing against each other, meaning your opponent is likely the person in the games closest to you. You can play a game of luck or a game of skill. You can play fair or you can play dirty. But one thing's for sure, whoever you're paired up with will need to be eliminated in order for you to move on. The only one lucky enough to be left without a partner in this round was Genu. Genu is clever and manipulative, but villains like Alistair and K. Rool would see through any facade he put up. As for the heroes, I mean, it's kinda obvious why they wouldn't trust them. And that leads us to our matches, starting with Alan versus Glep. When the game was revealed, Alan and Glep were obviously devastated at the idea of sentencing each other to elimination. If it came down to a battle of wits, we think the centuries-old Glep has a clear advantage, but the question really boils down to whether or not Glep would be willing to seal Alan's fate.
You was born in 329 AD? You must have seen some crazy crap in your time, dude.
We could honestly see Glep trying to convince the soldiers to let both him and Alan live by doing his iconic dance, which would sadly get poor Glep eliminated right off the bat, leaving Alan to narrowly survive.
I don't really want this.
Next are our final two anime reps, All Might versus Momo. Momo is a powerful psychic who can see into the auras of her opponents, and she thinks quickly on her feet in battle. So we wouldn't be surprised if she saw through whatever tricks her opponents tried to use. The thing is though, this is All Might. He'd maybe use tricks against a truly evil villain like All For One, but certainly not against a teenage girl. Knowing All Might, he'd propose a simple game of skill between himself and Momo, one that she'd be able to win without All Might having to self-sabotage. All Might was still pretty impressive in this Squid Game, even being left quirkless in Season 3. You gotta respect that ambition. Moving on to Rick versus SpongeBob. Like All Might and Momo, these two would opt for a fair, skill-based game. But unlike All Might, SpongeBob would absolutely self-sabotage here. Not only is he too sad over the loss of his friends to focus on the game, but he couldn't bring himself to eliminate such a cute, cuddly hamster.
Player eliminated.
Then there's Will versus 11, one of the more gut-wrenching matchups since these two have been close friends since early in the series. Neither of them would be willing to sentence the other to certain doom, so the only solution would be to go with a luck-based guessing game. We think Will loses this match because he's less composed than 11, and more likely to just straight up surrender to the guards so she can live. And if you thought that one was sad, then there's Donkey Kong versus Pauline. And there's just no happy ending for this one. I mean, it basically goes without saying that DK would be willing to sacrifice himself so his buddy could live on, but honestly, we think that Pauline is every bit as likely to do the same.
Player eliminated.
And it would catch DK so off guard that by the time she could secure a win for her big buddy, he'd already be moving on to the penultimate round. Needless to say, DK is going to be pretty pissed during that final round. And last but not least, we have Alistair versus K. Rool. Alistair offered K. Rool a deal he couldn't refuse. If the Kremlin commander simply did Alistair one simple favor, King K. Rool would make it to the end of the game. K. Rool was skeptical, but then again, he planned on betraying Alistair later on anyway, so he went ahead and shook his hand for kicks and giggles. It turns out that, once again, Alistair employed some good old-fashioned wordplay. His favor was for K. Rool to hand all of his marbles to him. Then, once that was finished, he simply said, "Our game is done," and K. Rool was swiftly eliminated. But Alistair technically didn't lie. K. Rool did make it to the end of their little game. They just had very different ideas about what the game was.
Only 7 players remain. It's time to move on to our penultimate game, Jump Rope. In this game, players must cross a dangerous bridge while making sure they aren't knocked off by a gigantic double Dutch-style jump rope. They'd best be careful, because the rope speeds up over time, and they only have 20 minutes to cross.
Unlike glass stepping stones, there's no reliance on luck here, just sheer agility, speed, and composure. You'll need courage, balance, and good timing to get through this round. Those with kind hearts could help weaker players cross, but those with a more mischievous nature could easily sabotage the game to help their own chances. But real quick, let's see who's still standing. Genu, Alan, Momo, Rick, 11, Donkey Kong, and Alistair. Without a shred of hesitation, Rick speeded past the finish line within mere seconds, just a small sample of his otherworldly speed. As for Alan, he was a bit more cautious, but some encouragement from Alistair got him moving. Unfortunately, Alan only made it about halfway across before tripping and falling, only narrowly hanging on to the edge of the bridge. But thankfully for him, Momo and Elle were feeling particularly altruistic. They picked him up and carried him across the rest of the bridge, securing him a spot in the next round. That was when things got boring for Alistair, so he decided to make a new friend. Somehow he managed to convince DK that if DK would just throw Genu off the ledge, he'd bring his little buddy back. DK felt bad about it, but he ultimately accepted, and after a scuffle, he overpowered Genu and eliminated him.
Player eliminated.
But when it came time for Alistair to fulfill his end of the bargain, all he did was bring Diddy Kong into the arena to say hi. He didn't specify which little buddy he'd bring back, after all. And that led to a seriously intense chase across the bridge. While both DK and Alistair are safe for now, only time will tell what the last round will have in store.
Only 6 players remain. It is now time for the final round. Prepare for our final game, Squid Game.
This game is designed for at least 4 players with at least 3 eliminations. Players press a button on each tower to begin the round, after which they'll have a set amount of time to push at least 1 living player off the tower. Once a player is pushed off, the others may move to the next tower. However many players are left on the final circle-shaped tower when the clock runs out, after at least 1 player was eliminated, will be crowned the winner or winners of the Squid Game. The remaining players can either depend on diplomacy to decide which player to gang up on, or they can just jump into a full-on brawl and see how things turn out. And it starts on the square tower. With only 6 players left, tensions were high, but of course it was pretty clear who the most reasonable choice was for elimination. Alistair is by far the most sketchy and untrustworthy of the remaining players, and DK is just one of the guys itching to see him eliminated. Momo and 11 were on the same page here, but they knew better than to outright attack him. Even with the votes being 5-1, Alistair still operated under the mantra of, "What are you gonna do about it, bitch?" As far as Alistair was concerned, there was only one clear choice for elimination, that chunky hamster sitting in the corner. Like, what's he gonna do? Run circles around Alistair until he has an opportunity to shoulder check him off the ledge? Well yeah, that's exactly what Rick did. Alistair has pulled his last string.
Player eliminated.
It's time to move on to the Triangle Tower. Alistair may have been the biggest problem of the bunch, but the remaining players still have a dilemma. They need to decide which remaining players have to die in order for the rest of them to survive. And unfortunately for poor Alan, he's first up on the chopping block.
I don't really want this.
Without any of the other smiling friends to act as allies, Alan is just some weird red guy. He's surprisingly strong and capable, but we don't think he's beating the psychic teenage girls or the supernaturally gifted animals.
Player, you have been eliminated.
And it all comes down to the Circle Tower. With Momo, 11, Donkey Kong, and Rick. Only one of them needs to fall in order for the others to leave rich as kings. DK is definitely having a hard time, but he's still got DK Island to get back to, so he's not giving up easily. But we also don't see him eliminating any of the other players very easily. Elle and Momo are young girls, not too much older than his departed friend, so he wouldn't have the heart to attack them. And Rick, come on, just look at him. He's adorable. And while Elle has lost 2 of the people she loves most, she still has a lot left to fight for. The same goes for Momo, too. She knew Akarun got eliminated so she could live, and she had to honor that. In the end, only one player was willing to give up in this final round. Rick. See, the thing about Rick is that he's a being of near infinite power. Even if he jumps off this ledge, he'll bounce back. So really, it's not a big deal. The worst case scenario is him not being rich, which isn't too big of a deal when he's a giant hamster who lives on a magical star planet. That sounds better than being rich in many ways.
Player eliminated. With that, we have 3 survivors in this Squid Game. Congratulations to DK11 and Momo Ayase. You've won the Squid Game. Now use that money to get some much needed therapy, and bananas, of course. As for you VIPs, please ignore the Kong Bonanza music playing outside of your door. You are not in any danger.